a lot of different ways to compromise. And because we've done so many transactions and we sold so many houses and we've seen so many situations, we have a good idea about what all the different solutions could be. Then it's finding the right solution for this property, then having another negotiation between the buyer and seller to try to find which compromise works best for this situation.
Team Sweasey Escrow Manager Dakota Bailey on the importance of compromise and how it is essential for successful real estate transactions, ensuring both parties walk away satisfied. Also in this episode, the team discusses the rising inventory in San Luis Obispo County, creating opportunities for sellers to capitalize on demand and for buyers to find their starter or even their dream home. With rent rates climbing, the SLO County Real Estate Podcast explores why home ownership remains a smarter long-term investment, and the team breaks down the importance of strategic pricing when listing your home. Set it right, because the market always finds the true value. Now, Team Sweasey.
Let's go.
All right, we're going, JT. San Luis Obispo Real Estate Podcast with the team, Mr. Sweasey, John Turner, and I'm going to introduce this fine young fellow from our team, Mr. Dakota Bailey. How are you, sir? You get the opening hello. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks, James.
Awesome. I'm excited to have Dakota here.
You ran a radio show, did you not?
No, I didn't run radio.
No, that was Cindy.
Yeah, that was Cindy.
Yeah.
No, I was on the news, though, for my high school. So
that's
it's
what I
like
meant.
the same thing.
Pretty much. Yeah, so you're now qualified.
Yes.
You're above qualified for our
Yeah.
here.
It's
Was
Dakota's,
there any news?
What?
There's always news in high school.
What was the most scintillating story that you had to cover in high school?
Oh.
Well, they'd always limit the good stuff, and we had to read the announcements. Honestly. But one time we got away with reading the announcements on a toilet, and they didn't like that.
Wait, did you have remote mics? I mean, how'd that work?
Yeah, I mean, we had your typical stuff that high schoolers would have.
Different than when you were young, James.
Yeah.
Yes,
Whole new
yeah.
James.
Yeah, we had to etch it in stone when I was in
Yeah.
school.
Oh,
yeah.
wait, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Plus he was in Taft. So you know
Yes.
there's a lot of dynamics going on.
Oh, yeah.
Taft.
Okay.
Good old Taft. I hear the weather's nice in Taft in the summer.
Summertime, it gets real nice. Over 105 degrees nice.
Yeah.
Right? The oil smells much sweeter.
Oh, yeah, it does. It does. It
Yeah,
really does.
it's
when
oily.
It's hot.
It's oily.
It's like money.
So we usually like to talk about a few topics. So, of course, what's happening with the number of sales and the market statistics. Dakota wanted me to bring this one up. He wants to talk about compromise in transactions.
Yeah, he
because,
does.
You know, if people don't compromise, nothing happens. And then lastly, this was John and my favorite topic. We're going to talk about affordability. As we look at the number of homes for sale, the inventory is up about a third over last year. So we've noticed that trend going on, and we feel it's healthy for the marketplace. Pendings were up year over year about 12%, so that was nice. And then the number of closed sales was down about 2% month over month versus a year ago.
And and we have
Yeah.
a very wide listening basis for San Luis Obispo County. You're talking about, right?
Just San Luis Obispo
Just San
County.
Luis Obispo County, yeah.
Residential properties, right? Not multifamily, land, that sort of thing. Owner of our company brought in the sales quarter over quarter, and this quarter was a little bit slower than last quarter. And we had a booming fourth quarter, so we're expecting that to continue. It kind of leveled off. So I would say sales had leveled. And then another factor and statistic we look at is new listings, and that jumped 61%. So that's a lot. We're seeing a lot more homes for sale. So Dakota, I get a lot of this, and people are worried like, oh gosh, what's happening in the marketplace? Probably a lot's from realtors. And what they're not used to is this is just approaching a normal market.
Yeah, it actually reminds me of when I started on this team back in like 2018.
Right.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
It just feels, and that was the I'd say the norm back then, but that's just how it was. And I think Sharon at one point, our listing manager, had 32 listings on her board, and that was just normal. And then during COVID, it shot up, and everyone kind of got really excited. They're like, "Oh, this is what real estate's like."
Yes.
And now it's coming back to kind of how it was, just a nice steady market where we don't have crazy high price increases, where your average rate of 3% a year, it seems like, is where we're at. They're still kind of going up, but they're not going up 8, 9, 10% every quarter.
They're not COVID increases.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just feels normal now.
Yeah. Graham said in our meeting, and you just opened another escrow for him on the one that was listed in the 1.5 range and sold over 1.7.
Yeah.
We don't give addresses, but 1.710 was it or something?
1.705.
So there's a $200,000 increase. So the point is, there's still homes that are well priced, good condition, desirable. This buyer had been looking for a while, and they paid more than the listed price, which is not uncommon.
More than one buyer must have wanted that home.
Yep, that's exactly.
It was
what
a
happened.
desirable location, good shape, priced very competitively, which drove the price up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did Christina call it? Price. We'll find its price in our meeting the other day. It was really good. She goes, I said, what do you see? And she goes, well, if you make a mistake on the high side in pricing, you're going to spend a lot more time on the market, and you're just going to fall in the group now that there's some competition that's just kind of sitting there. And if you stand out, and even if you're a little bit low, you'll price adjust up to where the market is, if not more than you would get by.
If you're low, you'll get to market value. Not like, you start low and someone looks at that and be like, well, only one person wants to buy the house at all.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of buyers if you come in a little bit lower, and you're going to eventually get to what would be market. Yeah.
It's sort of counterintuitive, but Hal taught me that back about the time you started with us in 2018. I sold a property and I wanted to price it more aspirationally, and Hal said, no, price it here. If it's worth what your aspiration price is, you'll get it.
Yep.
But then when a consumer looks at a comp, they're like, well, the guy down the street, you take a look at that and you're like, they sold, it's the same house, essentially.
Sure.
They sold it for that. And you're like, I want to sell it for that, if not more. That's what we're being told. And then you guys come in and you're like, well,
Don't say you guys.
Yeah. Dakota comes in
sure.
and Christina comes in and they say, it'll find its price. It's hard. It's hard for when you have your baby though.
Oh,
It
is. Like I said,
that's why you have to listen to experts.
It's like I said, it's counterintuitive.
Yeah, it really is.
JT,
By the way, the price that I got for that property was what Hal said it was.
Lucky
It
one.
was aspirational. And a lot of people think that way. I want to get the most for my property, but to get the most for your property, you got to price it more competitively, not price it too high.
Yeah.
John, what was that saying that you had? Whoever values a house, values the house the most?
Whoever values the house the most is the one that's going to end up with it, and that may be the seller.
The point will be, as we have more homes for sale, so it seems like, and it's definitely shifting.
Yeah.
So you have more houses for sale. We were here, now we're here, and about the same number of buyers. It's going to take longer to sell a house, more like a normal time frame. Still, the homes that are selling, what's our days on the market that closed in San Luis last month? 35, in Morro Bay, 46, and then the ones that aren't selling are like 72 days. So that's still just very normal.
That's still pretty straightforward.
Yeah. I think my advice would, if you're thinking of becoming a home seller, price and condition are the big factors. In fact, I heard an interesting statistic from a guy I listen to a lot about real estate in general. And the second largest home builder in the country, their cost to sell at the time of selling, not building, just to sell, was under 2%. Okay, sounds good. And now here we are 3 or 4 months later, their cost to sell has gone up to 13%.
That's huge.
And think about that. The average house, let's call it 400,000 in the country. So 40 plus $1,000.
Yeah, right.
Right. That's a huge. And now people go, well, what are the costs?
Yeah, what are they spending that $40,000 on?
Yeah, what is that? So, you usually have in-house salespeople, so you don't have the regular commissions. But now, as they slow down, they start to tell the realtors, hey, we'll incent you to come bring your buyers.
Right.
That could be rate buy downs to make it more competitive. So we're going to spend money, help the buyer get a lower rate so they can afford the house. Could be insurance, could be homeowners dues. There's lots of things they'll do to make it attractive. I remember during the recession, they were like including a car with a house. I have to tell a funny story. I'm with my son. We're going to a restaurant downtown, and the Greek place said, dollar beers, during this happy hour. And I said, if you buy a meal, I go, we should do that in our real estate business. If you buy a house, you get $1 beers. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah.
I think we ought to do it.
Yeah. Well, you get buy a house, you get $1 beers. Anyway,
I hope
How many houses would John own?
Yeah, I know, right?
I hope
he'd have to buy a lot more.
I hope the Department of Real Estate would go along with this.
Okay. Well, okay. You just vetted that one out. Right. But they spend the money on it. So why does it matter what a new home builder does? Well, they want to keep their prices high, so they want to incent people to come buy their product, and they don't want to reduce it because all their other houses they then have to reduce.
Right.
So they do incentives. So what does that mean to someone normal or regular seller? If your roof is old and you're trying to sell in this market, you might have to pay get a new roof. What other
Right.
things come up that increase the value or make it more saleable? Because you deal with this every day.
Usually, and it always rolls around whenever we have, a storm that comes in, is roofs issues do get in, but also foundation issues.
Right.
Somebody goes in and says, I've had, my house has been fine. I've lived here for 30 years. It hasn't fallen down yet.
Right.
But then somebody goes under and says, well, you've got a big crack running right down your, your stem wall and your foundation that needs to be fixed. And it's like, well, I haven't had issue before. Well, tell that to a buyer. So don't worry about it. That crack doesn't mean anything. Eventually someone's going to take care of it. It's either going to be the seller or it's going to be the buyer.
Right.
And a lot of times, especially right now, the buyer's going to ask for the seller to take care of it, or at least a concession so that they can take care of it later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or go away, leave, and buy one that doesn't have a foundation issue.
Right.
So to make yourself competitive, that's what you have to do.
Let's dive a little deeper into some of the things that Dakota deals with. I mean, it's one thing to talk about the market stats and pendings and sales and new listings and all that. But once a house goes under contract, that's when Dakota goes to work, right?
Right. That's correct.
You're our escrow manager alongside the title insurance company, right, to get the deal closed. Now, I asked the county manager for one of the major title companies the other day, what percentage of the escrows that open actually close with a successful sale?
Jeff, do you know what the answer is? You want to make a guess? What percentage of escrows that open close?
I will say it is 55.
Oh,
55?
really close.
You're close?
Yeah, you've been around the podcast.
60%.
Okay.
JT, I wanted to guess.
Oh, I thought you knew already.
I did. I just wanted to
you
sound
just-
like I
you
knew.
did a
Yeah.
little good.
Yeah.
Were you going to do the prices
but I
right?
mean-
Oh, you were so close. Yeah.
56.
59.5%.
Yeah, my
Okay, so-
educated guess.
So Dakota, 100 escrows are open. If 60 close,
Yep.
that means we got 40
They don't.
that didn't. I wouldn't think that would be good news for either the buyer or the seller, would
Nobody
it?
wants that to happen.
Usually for the seller, the second escrow that's open on the same property is usually not as successful price-wise as the first one,
Coming
right?
back on the market versus new on the market
Yeah.
they're different.
What does the public think?
What happened?
Yeah. Is there
Right.
something wrong with the place? Mm-hmm. You've been with us for 7 years and closed, how many escrows did you say?
Probably about 1,000.
About 1,000.
Yeah.
And your batting average, I know, is significantly better than 60%. What's your batting average?
We're about 90%.
Wow. So if you're a buyer or a seller out there and you go into escrow, most likely you want it to end with a successful closing, right?
Right.
I would want to hire Dakota. How could I possibly hire Dakota?
Well, he's not available. So next
so
question.
it means you have to be the
You
agent
can hire
for the
you
seller.
can hire Hal and I come
Oh,
in
I
with
thought you
it.
meant-
Oh,
You
yeah.
have to be the agent for the
Trying to
seller.
steal
We were all
Dakota.
together.
Or,
Yeah.
or you're the person that helps you buy a house has to be one of the agents on the team, right?
Right.
Then you get Dakota out of the deal,
Yeah.
which would be to your benefit.
Right.
Hal brought up the word compromise, and I think compromise is a huge word in what you do. But can you talk about some of the things that you do to keep these deals together?
Something to think about that's a little bit different is there's a lot of different ways to compromise. There's a lot of different solutions to answers. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 solutions. Other times there's 1 solution, but there could be 10 solutions. And because we've done so many transactions and we sold so many houses and we've seen so many situations, we have a good idea about what all the different solutions could be. And then it's finding the right solution for this property and then not convincing people, but, having another negotiation between the buyer and seller to try to find which compromise works best for this situation. I mean, it could be a concession, or it could be, hey, we just want extra time to figure out what's going on with this. And hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, will you give us extra time to figure out what's going on with, say, the electrical junction box that doesn't seem to be working correctly, or the lights are flickering. And it's like, okay, I understand that our due diligence period may be coming to a close, but we would like to figure this out. And we would, if you give us the extra time, then we're confident that we're going to move forward. But we just want to know what we're getting into. Especially right now where the market is more of a normal market, it's no longer, the buyers make a request and the sellers say, don't worry, I've got 10 other offers ready to go. It's more like, okay, great. These are the best buyers. We've already decided that they're the best buyers for us because we accepted their offer over some of the other ones that we got. And because we think they're the best buyers, let's work with these guys and make it happen. Usually your first buyer is generally the best one. Not always, but usually it is the best one. And so you really want to work with them. Sometimes people get stuck in the muds on, like, say, price. A buyer might say, hey, I want $80,000 off the price. And a seller may look at that and be like, no way, get out of here, kick rocks. I'm not doing that. But if they would come back and say, we can't do 80, but here's 30. And the buyer might be like, okay, great. That sounds good. That's kind of what I was looking for. That's why we came in high. Because unfortunately, people see a lot of stuff online and they think, hey, these are some strategies I saw on TikTok. And they say, come in super high. And then that way you get to your price, which is really what you want. Asking those questions between the buyers and the sellers, sometimes it is sticker shock whenever the ask comes in. But then usually that's not what they're actually looking for. And if you can get to that, then you can get to a compromise and you can get the deal closed, as opposed to for the seller going back on the market, hopefully getting another offer that's comparable or close to comparable. And for the buyer, it means maybe they love this house and, they kind of got in their own way thinking, oh, if I don't get this, then, I'm not moving forward. 3 weeks later, they may regret it whenever they see that the house is back under contract and they think, man, maybe we should have stayed in that house. That was a good one.
And those are big numbers, by the way, 80 and 30. Most of them are like 4 to.
I want $7,000
right for a new sewer line, whatever.
Yeah, here's 3. Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah, and I think you do a good job of counseling the sellers in terms of, okay, it needs a new sewer line. The buyer got a bid for $15,000. They got one for $12,000, so it's in that range. And your experience is something. If a seller says no to that buyer's request, it still comes with the property.
Yeah,
and the next buyer is probably going to ask for it.
Right.
And if it wasn't for sale, a lot of owners would just fix it anyway. 13%, way less, because our prices are $1 million. So if you have to spend $13,000 for a sewer line, that's not bad.
Right, exactly.
I hear this term, and I'd like to hear your opinions of the term. That the seller says the property is for sale, but it's as is.
Right.
Technically, the contract has a thing in there that says all transactions are as is. At the end of the day, if you've got a buyer who wants to buy, and to get them to buy it is going to be, $3,000 or $4,000
to do the termite report.
Exactly.
Or to do something that turned up on the inspection.
Or maybe to do something, like you said, the termite, or something that almost every buyer is going to ask for.
Yeah.
You're going to run into this over and over and over until you actually either one, do it, or, work with one of the buyers.
If something comes up on a report for the first escrow, it falls out, and the second escrow is now open, do those things have to be disclosed?
They do, yeah. So California is really strong on disclosures. So any material fact that if you don't disclose it up front to the buyer, you're opening yourself up to major legal troubles down the road. So any reports that you have to provide that to the buyer.
So there's an issue with the sewer line. The seller says no go. The buyer says I'm walking. They walk. Now they have another buyer. The seller now has to disclose to the new buyer the sewer line issue, right?
Yep.
Which means that the seller's going to have to take care of it, whether it's with the first buyer or the second buyer. It doesn't matter at that point, right? Mm-hmm. So you try to help them understand that's the scenario they're in, to try to keep the first escrow open and get it done.
It does happen every once in a while where maybe the first offer isn't always the best one. But, what we found is 75, 80% of the time, your first offer is your best one. So it's always better to work with your first set of buyers. What I say is, like, if you are going back on the market, you're just rolling the dice. And you're hoping that it comes up more than what you rolled before.
Yeah.
And that's all it is.
You have a calmness about you, which you need to have for your role, because sometimes you have to deliver kind of some tough news to either side.
Yeah, I would say that's probably the more difficult part of my job, is actually like, okay, well, I've got this request. I know how it's going to be received, but got to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is the least appealing part of the
Yeah.
business, in my opinion, because a buyer thinks or seller thinks they've sold, buyer thinks they've bought, then they find something. Oh, well,
So what part of delivering bad news do you think is a good part of any business?
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I shared this quote with Hal. I think you even used it on a market update recently. And that's that the definition of a successful compromise is where both parties are just a little bit unhappy at the end because they both had to give a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. And you probably deal with that situation often, right? Where at the end you go, I didn't get the $1 million. I got $990 because I had to agree to a $10,000 credit for something.
Yeah.
Sacrifice is hard for people these days, right? And then we have to tell them what have they sacrificed, especially if you're a homeowner. So can we move on to affordability?
Sure.
Yeah,
I
'cause that's
forgot
our last
about
topic.
affordability.
Yeah. That's because you can afford it. So
Fixed income.
yeah,
huh?
right. Yeah. So we look at that, and we like to talk it because I like sellers and buyers to know what do I make of this. So what's happened to home prices? They've gone up for a decade plus.
The 70 years I've been alive.
Yeah. There's been a few little blips here and there. The cost to insure a home is more expensive. Your rates are a little bit more expensive than they used to be, but still above average. So construction cost to fix a house, get things done. So there's an affordability question, if not a challenge in the marketplace. I like sellers to remember that because if you have owned a home in the last 10 years, in fact, James, can we put that the graph that Albert gave us? Price per square foot.
Yeah, we got it.
For the last 14 or 15.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean it's Jeff. If you could see it, it's stair step every single year, right? Just like that. And when he showed that graph at a meeting, I went, "Wow! Imagine that was a stock ticker, like the price of a stock. If you saw that stock, would you have bought that and been happy?
Yes.
Like
You'd
every
been glad
single
to have purchased
you know,
it back at the start.
yeah, and that's price per square foot. It's not median price where, last year was 1.1 and this year's 1.2, but your 1.2 gets you a smaller or bigger house. Price per square foot. It's like cost of an egg or a pound of meat every year. And so if you're a buyer and you can get in the market, this is the benefit you have over time of owning real estate in San Luis Obispo, like a great, company. So I say that to buyers because it's challenging. And John, we talked about that a little bit. That first payment, the first time you get that mortgage, Jeff, when you bought your first house, was that payment you're about to take on, that commitment, was that a little bit scary?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, we overextended ourselves, and I mean, knowing.
You felt you overextended yourself, but you didn't because you extended yourself personally.
Right.
You made it work, right?
Exactly. We figured out a way, and then, a year later, it was nothing.
Just a year.
Nothing.
You were used to it.
Yeah. We're
So what
totally
happened?
used to it. In fact, it was actually better because our mortgage rate stayed the same, and anything that we were going to rent, because we'd still keep an eye on that because we'd rented for a decade before that. And anything that we were going to rent, it was creeping up, and it was more than our mortgage payment at that point.
Okay, got it.
And so only a year, I was like, oh, thank God we did this, because it was financially feasible, and we had an investment.
Yep.
I'm going to make this up as we go.
I want to hear it.
The happiest people in real estate are the ones who stretched the farthest yesterday.
Yeah.
I just made that up.
There you go.
yeah.
There you go.
Put it on a T-shirt,
it's true.
trademark.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true. I mean, we stretched when we moved back to San Luis in 1995. We bought a house that was clearly $100,000 over our budget.
Yeah.
And in the 20 years, it tripled. Well, wouldn't you rather have a triple on a bigger number than a smaller number?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and we were stretched. I mean, I didn't know how I was going to do this, but 2 or 3 years into it, it was like, this isn't any big deal, kind of like what Jeff said.
Yeah. There was a great person that spoke to our office about going into the, just call it investment market, sold her house, has 2 kids, 4 dogs. They got a rental property, 700 square feet, sold their big house, and then they bought a bunch of investment real estate to get income. And they still, years. I mean, this has been a few years. It sounded like, right? I didn't get the time frame, but that's the sacrifice they made for the greater good.
And that was the key word: sacrifice.
Yeah,
we all make a sacrifice. You want to save for retirement, you got to sacrifice today.
So for those people that are on the fence or not sure or making the move or jumping into the marketplace, I think it's super important. And then for our sellers, gosh, realize how well you've done. And if the house was worth $20,000 less than you thought, is it still worth much more than you paid for it? And based on that graph and what we know about San Luis Obispo County, that's a strong yes. So at the end of the day, real estate in San Luis Obispo has been good. Our job is not convincing you buying or selling. Our job is to just help you, guide you through the best decision possible when it comes to real estate. So
And Dakota's great at helping us with that.
And Dakota can, it's not going to happen without Dakota.
He's about 30% better than the national average, right?
Yeah.
90%.
Yeah.
And Dakota has the best jokes, by the way.
He's funnier than you would know. On
Yeah,
this. Yeah.
He's got these little quips that he says. I listen every once in a while. I can hear it from my desk. He's just got these little. It makes me laugh.
Thank you for that, James. I appreciate that. Yeah.
I don't know if that was a compliment or not.
No, it's trust me.
Yeah.
It is a compliment.
He
Dakota
usually has me rolling once a day.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dakota.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dakota. Appreciate it. Watch us on YouTube. You're welcome for our great looking faces here, but also please like and share with everybody. Hey, Hal, I just
He just shot across the bow for you to.
that's what it is. Dakota. Yeah, that's
Okay.
because you're funny.
Yeah.
That's because you're funny. Thank you, everybody that watches our videos on YouTube and listens to us. Mr. Kingman, what's 805-244-1170?
Yes.
See, I remembered.
If you have any questions, call that number.
Text, call.
You can text it too.
Yeah,
if you
text,
want.
call.
If you just want to be like, hey, I got a question for these guys. They seem like they know what they're talking about. Or if you want to try to stump them, I put them up against any of you. The challenge has been issued.
Ooh, maybe we can do like a stump episode and have them call in live.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gauntlet. All right.
Yeah.
Lay it down.
All right. Well, if you want to call and talk to Dakota, you totally can. Yeah. Just give him a holler.
Yeah, I usually answer the phone, so.
Yeah. All right. Now, thank you, everybody, again. And we'll talk to everybody next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You can have your question featured on an episode of the SLO County Real Estate Podcast by texting it to 805-244-1170. That's 805-244-1170. Or if you'd like to have a conversation with the team about your unique situation, call Team Sweasey at 805-781-3750. And you can always email Hal at hal@teamsweasey.com for any questions you might have about real estate. The SLO County Real Estate Podcast is a production of AGM Podcasts. Get the latest episode by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts or subscribing to the YouTube channel. California DRE 01111 911.